Early in the year 2000, Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph flew from California to Dallas, Texas. They had been trying to get this meeting for months. Netflix, the company they co-founded in a town called Scotts Valley just 3 years earlier, was bleeding money. The dot-com crash had arrived. The business model was nothing more than DVD rentals by mail, and profitability was nowhere in sight. They landed, took an elevator to the 27th floor of the Renaissance Tower, and stepped into a conference room belonging to the largest video rental company on the planet. Blockbuster, at that moment, operated nearly 9,000 stores across 26 countries, had 65 million registered customers, and was pulling in close to $6 billion a year in revenue. Hastings and Randolph had a proposal. Let Netflix become Blockbuster's online arm. The price was $50 million. John Antioco, Blockbuster's chief executive, listened carefully and nodded politely. Then he said no. Former Netflix chief financial officer Barry McCarthy would later say that Blockbuster laughed us out of their office. That conference room on the 27th floor is where this story begins and where it ends. Because the company that laughed would be bankrupt within a decade, and the startup it dismissed would be worth more than $300 billion. But before Dallas, before the conference room, before any of it, there was a software developer in Texas who had an idea about barcodes and videotapes. You're watching American Electronics and Tech Channel, where we take apart the companies that built the electronic world, down to the circuit board and the engineer who designed it. This one does not involve circuit boards. It involves late fees, red envelopes, and the most expensive conference room rejection in American business history. If that's your kind of story, subscribe and hit like, because the rise here is just as strange as the fall. David Cook was not in the movie business. He ran a company called Cook Data Services, a firm he had founded in 1978 to sell software to oil and gas companies across Texas. The business never found its footing, and by the early 1980s, Cook was looking for something else. The idea, when it came, did not come from him. It came from his wife. Sandy Cook wanted to get into the video rental business. At the time, most video stores in America were small, dim, independently owned operations, with a few hundred tapes behind a counter. You walked in, told the clerk what you wanted, and hoped they had it. If they did, the clerk disappeared into a back room and emerged with a cassette. If they did not, you picked something else or went home. The selection was thin, the lighting was poor, and the experience was closer to visiting a pawn shop than a retail store. David Cook looked at this industry and saw what most people would not have seen. He did not see an entertainment problem. He saw a data problem: inventory tracking, demographic targeting, customer behavior, stock rotation. Every weakness in the video rental business was a weakness his software background could fix. He tried first to buy into a franchise called VideoWorks, based in Dallas. When the franchise refused to let him redesign the interior with his own blue and yellow color scheme, Cook walked away. It was one of the most productive disagreements in American retail history. On October 19, 1985, the first Blockbuster Video opened in Dallas, Texas. It carried 8,000 VHS tapes and 2,000 beta tapes, an inventory that dwarfed every video store in the country. But the real innovation was not on the shelves. It was in the system underneath. Cook installed a computerized barcode checkout, the kind of technology common in grocery chains, but unheard of in video rental. Every tape was tracked. Every rental logged. The store's inventory was tailored to the demographics of its neighborhood, using Cook's database to predict what the surrounding households would want to watch. Customers could browse the shelves, pull a cassette themselves, and check out at a counter. No waiting for a clerk to fetch something from the back. No adult films, ever, by policy. The store looked clean, felt modern, and worked. Cook built a $6 million warehouse in Garland, Texas, to supply new locations and began franchising the brand. Within a year, there were 4 stores. The model was proven. The money was not. Expansion required capital. Cook could not raise fast enough, and by 1987, the company was carrying significant debt. The man who would solve that problem had built his fortune hauling garbage. Wayne Huizenga was the co-founder of Waste Management, a company that had turned trash collection into a national empire through relentless acquisition. In 1987, his associate John Melk noticed a Blockbuster store and brought it to Huizenga's attention. The efficiency, the family-friendly policy, the scalable model. Huizenga initially had reservations about the video rental industry, but what he saw in Cook's system changed his mind. He led a group of investors that purchased a controlling stake for $18.5 million. At the time, Blockbuster had 19 stores. Cook had envisioned steady growth through franchising, a distributed network of independent owners running his system under his brand. Huizenga envisioned something different entirely. He wanted to own everything. Within months, Cook had surrendered full control. By late 1987, he was gone from the company he created, the man whose database software and inventory system would power every Blockbuster transaction for the next 2 decades. He went back to private life in Texas, and today he lives quietly, largely unknown to the millions of people who grew up with the brand he invented. His name would fade from the histories. Huizenga's would fill them. Where Cook had imagined a careful franchise network, Huizenga ran acquisitions like a military campaign. He opened new locations at a pace the industry had never seen. 1 store per day. He bought back franchised locations, absorbed rival chains whole. Major Video, the country's 4th largest chain, fell for $92.5 million. Vector Video. Video Superstores, Blockbuster's own largest franchisee, 106 stores swallowed in a single transaction. The company grew from 19 stores in 1986 to 133 in 1987, to 415 in 1988, to over 1,000 in 1989, 110 deals in 7 years. Employees at every level were partially compensated in stock options, which Huizenga used to drive a breakneck pace. The toll was real. One executive died of a heart attack. Others divorced. Nobody slowed down. By May 1989, Blockbuster went public on the New York Stock Exchange. The stock climbed from $5.75 to $33.50. Sales had tripled. Profits had nearly quadrupled. But Huizenga could already see the ceiling. Earnings growth, which had been 114% in 1988, dropped to 93% in 1989 and 48% in 1990. Cable television was expanding. Pay-per-view was arriving. In 1991, when Time Warner announced plans to upgrade its cable system, Blockbuster stock dropped more than 10% in 3 days. Huizenga began diversifying. He bought a controlling stake in Republic Pictures, a Hollywood production company. He invested in Discovery Zone, an indoor children's play chain that would later go bankrupt. He purchased music retailers Sound Warehouse and Music Plus, creating Blockbuster Music. He partnered with Richard Branson's Virgin Group to build entertainment megastores. By 1993, the blue and yellow logo sat atop more than 3,400 stores worldwide, a third of them overseas. But Huizenga's eyes were on the exit. He had built the empire. He did not intend to defend it against whatever was coming next. That instinct, the sense that physical video rental was living on borrowed time, was the one thing Wayne Huizenga got exactly right. It was also the one thing none of his successors could solve. In January 1994, Viacom, the media conglomerate controlled by Sumner Redstone, announced a merger with Blockbuster valued at $8.4 billion. Redstone saw the stores as a natural retail outlet for Viacom's films and music. Huizenga saw a payday. The deal closed in September. Blockbuster had a new parent company and soon a new set of problems. Under Viacom, the company drifted. It expanded into apparel. It tried to build a lifestyle brand around a video rental chain. Cash flow fell 70% in the second quarter of 1997. That June, Viacom hired John Antioco, a retail veteran who had run Taco Bell and spent 20 years at 7-Eleven, to take over as chief executive. Antioco arrived to find a company bloated with failed experiments, a music division, a clothing line, partnerships that had nothing to do with video rental. He stripped it all back. Then he did something that changed the economics of the entire industry. In 1998, Antioco signed revenue-sharing agreements with the major Hollywood studios. Before those deals, every video store in America bought new VHS tapes at roughly $65 each, an enormous per-unit cost that limited how many copies of a hit movie any single store could afford. Under the new arrangements, Blockbuster paid as little as $1 to $6 per tape up front and split the rental revenue with the studio. The shelves filled overnight. Before revenue sharing, the average customer had to visit a Blockbuster 5 consecutive weekends to find the new release they wanted. After, it was there. But Antioco also made a decision that year whose consequences would unfold slowly and lethally. Warner Brothers, through its home video chief Warren Lieberfarb, offered Blockbuster an exclusive DVD rental window. The same revenue-sharing model that worked for VHS applied to the new disc format. Antioco turned it down. Warner responded by slashing its DVD wholesale prices, and Walmart seized the opening, eventually surpassing Blockbuster as the studio's single largest source of home video revenue. The DVD, the format that should have extended Blockbuster's dominance, instead became a commodity anyone could sell. In August 1999, Antioco took Blockbuster public again on the New York Stock Exchange, raising $465 million. The company was dominant, profitable, and growing, but a crack had already appeared in the foundation. But in Scotts Valley, California, two men had already built something Blockbuster's model could not answer. Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph had founded Netflix in 1997 on one simple premise: you should never have to drive to a store and hope. The famous origin story that Hastings launched Netflix after being charged $40 in Blockbuster late fees for the film Apollo 13 is widely repeated. It is also, by Mark Randolph's own account, an adorned anecdote at best. The real founding involved multiple motivations, including the rise of e-commerce and the convenience of DVD-sized packages that fit in a mailbox. What matters is what Netflix offered: a flat monthly subscription, no late fees, and a red envelope in the mail. The story everyone tells is a $40 late fee and a grudge. The documented record is thinner, and honesty requires a flag here. But the company was real, and it was growing. By 2004, Blockbuster had reached a scale that no video rental operation had ever approached, and none ever would again. 9,094 stores in 26 countries, 84,300 employees worldwide, $5.9 billion in annual revenue, 50 million active member accounts. The brand had become a verb. Make it a Blockbuster night was not a marketing slogan. It was a description of how millions of American families spent Friday evening. The store itself was the product. The drive across town past the blue and yellow glow visible from the road. The parking lot always half full. Inside, the new releases lining the perimeter wall, covers facing outward in bright rows. You walked the wall first, scanning for something you had been meaning to see. If it was there, you pulled the case off the shelf with a small, specific satisfaction that people who grew up with streaming will never quite understand, because the movie might not have been there, and that uncertainty is what made finding it feel like something. Then, the deeper aisles: comedy, horror, drama, the categories printed on placards hanging from the ceiling, children pulling parents toward the family section, teenagers drifting toward the back. The candy rack by the register, always impulse, always effective. And the membership card. That laminated blue rectangle, presented at checkout like a credential, sitting in 65 million American wallets. Blockbuster was not selling movies. It was selling the experience of choosing one, together, in person, on a Friday night. No algorithm has ever replicated what it felt like to stand in that aisle with someone you loved and argue about what to watch. But the business model that funded all of this carried a flaw so deep it was structural. Blockbuster earned enormous sums from late fees, listed in its financial filings as extended viewing fees. These charges had become a critical pillar of the company's revenue. The business was, in a meaningful sense, built on penalizing its own customers for enjoying its product too long. Every dollar earned from a late return was a dollar that made Netflix's no late fee subscription feel like liberation. And in 2004, at the precise moment of peak revenue, Viacom cut Blockbuster loose. The separation required a special cash dividend of $5 per share, roughly $905 million in total, almost entirely financed by new debt. Blockbuster entered independence, carrying nearly $1 billion in borrowed money, 9,000 stores, $6 billion in revenue, and a millstone around its neck at the exact moment it would need to run. John Antioco, to his credit, understood what was coming. He had sat across from Hastings in that Dallas conference room and said no. But the years since had sharpened his vision. In December 2004, he announced the end of late fees at more than 4,500 company-operated stores. The decision cost roughly $200 million a year in foregone revenue. That same year, he launched Blockbuster Online, a DVD by-mail subscription service designed to compete directly with Netflix. By late 2006, he expanded it into Blockbuster Total Access, a hybrid program that let online subscribers return DVDs at any physical Blockbuster store and walk out with a free rental on the spot. It was the one advantage Netflix could never match: 9,000 physical locations married to an online catalog. Total Access gained more than 2 million subscribers within months. Netflix's growth rate slowed. Hastings noticed. The weapon was working, but it was expensive. Dropping late fees cost $200 million a year. Building the online platform cost another $200 million. Profitability collapsed even as the strategic position improved. And in May 2005, Carl Icahn, a billionaire activist investor who had accumulated a significant stake in Blockbuster, waged a proxy fight and won seats on the board. Icahn believed Antioco was burning cash on unproven digital initiatives, while the core business bled. Antioco believed the only path to survival ran through those losses. You can read that decision two ways, and honest history holds both readings at once. Icahn saw a chief executive spending $400 million a year on experiments that might never pay off. Antioco saw a company with one narrow window to reinvent itself before the world moved on. Reed Hastings, years later, said something that should weigh on both sides. If it hadn't been for their debt, they could have killed us. The board sided with Icahn. In 2007, after a bitter dispute over his compensation, John Antioco was forced out, the man who had built the only digital strategy that ever genuinely frightened Netflix. His replacement would not share his concern about the future. His replacement would not even see the future standing directly in front of him. Jim Keyes came from 7-Eleven. He was a convenience store executive, a man who understood foot traffic and impulse purchases, and the logistics of keeping shelves stocked in 10,000 small boxes across the country. He took over Blockbuster in July 2007, and his first move was to reverse nearly everything John Antioco had built. He cut funding for Blockbuster Online. He pulled back Total Access. He refocused the company on its physical stores, the 9,000 blue and yellow boxes he understood. In 2008, he gave an interview that history has not been kind to. "I've been frankly confused by this fascination that everybody has with Netflix," he said. "Netflix doesn't really have or do anything that we can't or don't already do ourselves." That same year, he attempted to purchase Circuit City, another brick-and-mortar retailer drowning in the digital transition. Circuit City filed for bankruptcy a few months later. The fact that the deal fell through may have bought Blockbuster 2 extra years of life. Those years were not kind. Revenue fell, stores closed. The $1 billion in debt from the Viacom spinoff still sat on the books, accruing interest that Blockbuster could no longer service. Netflix, meanwhile, had 20 million subscribers and was preparing to launch streaming globally. The company Hastings had offered to sell for $50 million was becoming something Blockbuster could no longer comprehend, let alone compete with. On September 23, 2010, Blockbuster filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. It listed nearly $1 billion in debt. In April 2011, Dish Network, a satellite television provider, won the bankruptcy auction with a bid valued at approximately $320 million, roughly $228 million in cash after adjustments. Consider what that number means. Viacom had paid $8.4 billion for Blockbuster in 1994. 16 years later, the entire company sold for less than the cost of the special dividend it had been forced to pay on the way out of Viacom's door. A company that once generated nearly $6 billion a year in revenue was purchased for less than what it used to earn in 3 weeks. Carl Icahn, the activist investor who had pushed Antioco out, later offered his own verdict. "Blockbuster," he said, "turned out to be the worst investment I ever made. Dish Network kept some stores open. It did not keep them open long." By January 2014, the last 300 company-owned Blockbuster locations closed. The blue and yellow signs came down from strip malls across the country, one by one, in cities that had once had 3 or 4 stores each. The shelves were emptied. The fixtures were sold. The membership database, 65 million names deep, became a relic. Blockbuster still technically exists today as a corporate shell called BB Liquidating, Inc. In January 2021, its stock ticker briefly surged during the GameStop short squeeze, a dead brand animated for a few days by Reddit traders who treated it as a meme, a ghost pulse in a company that had been gone for a decade. But not entirely gone. One store survived. In Bend, Oregon, a franchise location run by a manager named Sandy Harding refused to close. It is still open. It is the last Blockbuster on Earth, and it operates now less as a video rental store than as a museum, a pilgrimage site for people who remember what it felt like to walk those aisles. Visitors come from around the world. They take photographs next to the sign. They browse the shelves with a reverence that no one felt in 2004, when there were 9,000 of these places and nobody thought twice about them. What Blockbuster sold was never really the movie. It was the act of choosing one in person with someone on a Friday night, in a place that smelled like carpet and popcorn and possibility. Streaming gave us everything in the catalog and took away the thing that made choosing feel like an event. The people who lived it know this. They do not need it explained. They just know that something disappeared from Friday night and nothing replaced it. The Renaissance Tower still stands in downtown Dallas. The 27th floor is still there. Blockbuster is not. Netflix, as of mid-2026, is worth more than $320 billion, roughly 6,400 times what Hastings offered to sell it for in that conference room. The startup that was laughed out of the building became one of the most valuable entertainment companies in the history of the world. The empire that did the laughing was sold for parts and forgotten. But the simplest version of this story, that Blockbuster was too arrogant to see the future, is not quite the truth. Blockbuster did see the future. One man in that company built a real weapon against it, a hybrid platform that married 9,000 stores to an online catalog and had Netflix's own leadership worried. He was fired for it. The board wanted short-term profits. The activist investor wanted discipline. They got both and lost everything. Blockbuster did not die because it ignored the future. It died because the one executive who tried to build that future was fired for spending too much money on it. If you had a Blockbuster membership card, if you worked behind the counter, if you remember the Friday night drive and the new releases wall and the sound of a VHS case snapping shut, drop a comment below. Tell us your city, your store, and whether you still have the card. The people who rented there and the people who worked there. Know more about what was lost than the people who sold it. Subscribe if this is the kind of history you come here for. We are building an archive of the companies that shaped the way Americans lived, and we have the story of another American empire coming next. You will not want to miss how it ends.